Number 7. Grubhub Rescue. In June of 2022, a woman being held hostage in Yonkers, New York, was rescued after delivery workers noticed her plea for help in the notes of her Grubhub order. The 24-year-old woman, not named in the story, was kidnapped by a man she met for the first time in person after communicating for months online. When she arrived at 32-year-old Kamoy Royal's apartment, he assaulted her and refused to let her leave. As she was being held hostage, Royal was accused of grabbing the woman by her throat and threatening to kill her as he pressed a knife against her skin. He took her cell phone away from her, and the only time she was allowed to have it was when she was ordering food. However, she came up with a way to outsmart her captor. While ordering a meal on Grubhub from the Chipper Truck Cafe, she added a note with the delivery request that basically asked them to bring the police along with the food. Employees at the restaurant found the note to be highly unusual, so they called the owner of the establishment to see what they should do. Just to be on the safe side, they were told to comply with the request, and they called the authorities. When police arrived at the residence, Royal was quickly arrested. He was charged with criminal possession of a weapon, unlawful imprisonment, strangulation, and kidnapping. Apparently, he was also indicted for the assault of another 26-year-old woman just a few days before he kidnapped the victim he met online. Number 6. Quick thinking. In November of 2022, a fourth grader from Pottstown, Pennsylvania narrowly escaped a potentially life-threatening situation by using the strategy his father taught him. According to ABC6 Philadelphia, Sammy Green, a quick-thinking 10-year-old, thwarted a woman's kidnapping attempt. He was walking home alone from school one day when a woman he'd never seen before began to make conversation with him. She was asking Sammy all kinds of questions that were none of her business, like, "Where's your family? Where's your dad at? Where are you going?" Sammy began to get uncomfortable and felt like something bad might happen if he continued entertaining her curiosity. When the woman started to try and lure Sammy into a convenience store nearby, he knew he had to act fast because nobody else seemed to notice the potentially dangerous situation that was unfolding. Sammy remembered the advice his father told him for a scenario just like this, and so he ducked into a store called Danny B. Funky, which was familiar to him. The woman who had been following him hung out outside the business, waiting for him to come out, but Sammy knew exactly what to do. He approached the store's 17-year-old cashier, later identified as Hannah, and asked her to pretend to be his mom. He explained that he was being followed, and Hannah immediately complied with his request. She walked over to the entrance of the store and put herself between the woman and Sammy, then locked the door, making it impossible for the suspected kidnapper to enter. From there, Sammy was able to call his parents, who were so proud of him for doing everything they told him to do in that situation. Hannah was praised as a hero and is now a reminder that good people still do exist in this world. The female suspect was later tracked down by the police, and she is now being treated for mental health issues, but no formal charges have been brought up against her. Sammy was extremely lucky in this situation, and it's terrifying to even wonder what might have happened if he wasn't trained on what to do under these circumstances. Number 5. Mexican cartel assassination. Aranza Ramos, a 28-year-old activist from Sonora, Mexico, was found dead after she was kidnapped from her home in July of 2021. Ramos spent the last 7 months of her life desperately searching for her husband, who had also vanished in early December of 2020. She formed multiple volunteer groups with the main purpose of tracking her spouse down, but before she managed to find him, she was assassinated. Ramos' body was discovered by the police lying on a sidewalk in the Guaymas neighborhood of Ortiz. According to the local media, an armed group of men forcibly removed the woman from her home at about 10 p.m. that night. She had apparently participated in the investigation of a clandestine grave where human remains were found on the same day she was murdered. The volunteer groups she was part of were responsible for uncovering around 500 bodies from 300 similar graves since 2019. One theory surrounding her death is that the men responsible for the crimes wanted to keep her quiet. This seems likely since more than 87,800 people have been reported missing in Mexico since 2006. This was when former President Felipe Calderón expanded the country's battle against the vicious drug cartels. For almost 20 years, mass graves had been discovered by the loved ones of those who had disappeared as they began their own investigations. As for the murder of Aranza Ramos, nobody's been arrested in connection to the crime. However, it's believed that she's likely a victim of the needless violence committed by the various drug cartels who have been wreaking havoc in Mexico in recent years. And now for number 4. But first, it's shout-out time. We want to give a huge thank you to Bobby Joe Lester for supporting this channel. We love your feedback. If you're new here, be sure to subscribe for more videos like this one. Now back to your regularly scheduled program. Number 4. Definition of evil. A man and a woman were arrested in Falfurrias, Mexico in 2021 when they were accused of kidnapping a victim of human trafficking just after he finally broke free. 34-year-old Ricardo Mejia and 39-year-old Amy Regalado were charged with kidnapping and aggravated assault in connection to the crime. The 21-year-old victim's name was kept private, but after he was smuggled across the U.S. border, he was released by his original captors in a remote part of South Texas. He was allegedly let go due to a perceived law enforcement threat. After finally finding freedom, he wandered for days until he stumbled upon a gas station where he found the courage to ask a random man for help. Unfortunately, the stranger turned out to be relatives of Mejia and Regalado, who also happened to be smugglers. The man called his family members immediately, and they soon appeared to pick up the 21-year-old man. As the victim was once again held hostage in the backseat of their car, Mejia and Regalado began to negotiate a ransom with the man's aunt in order for him to be released in Houston. However, when the two parties couldn't decide on a price, the smugglers took off with the woman's nephew in their vehicle, running her over in the process. Victoria County authorities quickly took notice of their erratic driving and pulled the pair over. When they saw the victim in the car, the criminals were taken to Rosenberg Station, where they were arrested and charged for the crime. Rosenberg Police Assistant Chief Nethery described Mejia and Regalado as the definition of evil, since they returned a victim of human trafficking into captivity after he'd finally found freedom. The most recent update on the case came in July of 2021, when the criminals were transported to Fort Bend County Jail. For the time being, they're waiting for their sentencing, but it's more than likely that they'll spend the rest of their life behind bars. At least, one can only hope. Number 3. Deception. A man from Rockford, Illinois kidnapped and murdered his ex-girlfriend, leaving her son without a mother in 2022. On July 23rd, the body of 38-year-old Ashley Hardin was discovered by authorities behind a business called Ecolab in Roscoe, the place where the woman worked. According to the Winnebago County State's Attorney's Office, 2 live rounds were found near her body as well as some unused zip ties. Police had gone out searching for her when her son reported her missing just 4 hours earlier. When officers responded to Hardin's residence that Saturday during the early morning hours, the woman's son explained what happened to them. He told them he saw his mother approach a white car outside their house, but she never came back inside, despite telling him to wait for her. While doing a quick search of the property, authorities found 3 milk jugs that were filled with gasoline, one of which had been emptied onto Hardin's home. The woman's ex-boyfriend, 46-year-old Rayshawn Smith, was quickly named as a person of interest in the case. When investigators spoke with one of Hardin's friends, Kyla Trevio, she reported that Smith had driven a wedge between Hardin and her loved ones. This statement only made him more of a suspect in the eyes of the authorities. After examining the woman's body, they noticed extensive injuries to her head, and they believed that Smith had struck Hardin multiple times. And although projectiles were found near her body, she didn't appear to be shot. Surveillance footage from Ecolab proved that Smith was there that night, as his white Cadillac was seen driving through the parking lot less than an hour before police discovered Hardin's lifeless body behind the building. More evidence was uncovered when Smith posted a cryptic video to his Facebook page where he said, "People are going to call me crazier and wonder why I did what I did." Deception. To police, this seemed to be the ramblings of a guilty conscience, and Smith was later arrested that morning. In his vehicle, police recovered several zip ties, Hardin's medications, and a machete. Blood was also splattered throughout the Cadillac, which investigators believed to be Hardin's. It was concluded that Smith planned to burn down the woman's house with her and her son inside, but his plan was thwarted when the smell of gasoline woke them up. When Hardin went outside to see where the smell was coming from, Smith forced her into his car. He then held her hostage until he decided to kill her. In the end, Smith was charged with aggravated kidnapping, first-degree murder, and aggravated unlawful restraint. He is currently being held on $2 million bond at the Winnebago County Jail, but his sentencing is scheduled for December 15, 2022. Number 2. Fight like hell. In 2022, a man tried to kidnap a woman in Burlington, Massachusetts, but was stopped by a Good Samaritan who just might have saved her life. It was around 8:20 p.m. in May of that year when Ariel Naylor noticed a terrifying incident taking place. A man had a hold of a defenseless woman's hair and was dragging her through an empty parking lot. The victim's shirt was missing, indicating that during her struggle to break free, it was ripped off of her. Naylor would later describe the woman fighting like hell to get away from her attacker. The Good Samaritan, who saw all of this unfolding from the safety of her car, then put herself in harm's way in order to try and help. Naylor jumped out of her vehicle and ran in their direction, which must have scared off the attempted kidnapper. The man fled the scene, thankfully, leaving his victim behind. Naylor then called 911 to report the crime, and in the background of the call, Zaira Mendoza, the victim, can be heard loudly sobbing. After the whole ordeal was finally over, 37-year-old Zaira told WCVB-TV that she didn't know if she'd still be alive if it wasn't for Naylor. She credited the Good Samaritan for helping her escape the attempted kidnapping and said she thought the man was going to sexually assault her or possibly even kill her. Zaira explained that Naylor was the only woman that stopped, suggesting that there were others who did not try to intervene. A few days later, 23-year-old Tyler Healy was arrested in connection with the crime. He's since been charged with assault, attempted kidnapping, intent to commit a felony, and battery. Healy is currently in custody as he waits for his sentencing. Number 1. Black Death Organization. A British model flew to Milan for a phony photo shoot, where she was then kidnapped and held for 6 days before she was rescued in August of 2017. Many people didn't believe 20-year-old Chloe Ayling when she claimed to have been abducted. For some reason, after being held hostage for 6 days, she and 30-year-old Lucas Herba, her captor, showed up together at the Milan consulate. Chloe stuck to her guns, even when CCTV footage showed her holding Herba's hand. During the trial, Herba said that the two of them had come up with the plan to fake Chloe's kidnapping. His reason for doing this was to get Chloe out of certain financial difficulties. However, this admission of guilt didn't seem to fit Chloe's side of the story. She still accused Herba of kidnapping her and claimed that he even told her she would be auctioned off as a sex slave on the dark web. Chloe said she feared for her life every moment she was held captive, but this statement was hard for the public to believe since she was doing interviews and modeling shoots throughout the entirety of Herba's trial. Chloe consistently stuck to her story and said that her kidnapper tried to brainwash her. Herba apparently told her he was a member of Black Death, a violent organization full of Romanian traffickers that he desperately wanted to break free from. But he told her in order to get out of the group and for Chloe to be released, he needed to come up with 300,000 euros. He got into Chloe's head and eventually made her believe he was her only chance of survival, when in reality, everything he told her was a lie. Herba orchestrated everything and posed as a fake photographer online named Andre Lazio to convince Chloe to fly to Milan for a fake photo shoot. When she arrived, he kidnapped her and kept her hidden at a secluded farmhouse for 6 days. He originally planned to drop her off at the consulate and turn her in, but told Chloe that after she was released, she would need to send him 50,000 euros in Bitcoin. Herba convinced her to tell the authorities that he was her friend, at which point he thought he'd be able to walk out of the consulate without incident. He was wrong. After a few questions from police, the story Herba told Chloe to stick to began to fall apart. She couldn't tell the authorities Herba's phone number, which should have been easy if the two of them were friends, and eventually, the whole truth came out. As a result, Herba was initially sentenced to 16 years in prison, but after an appeal, it was reduced to only 5 years and 8 months in 2021. While this case may seem confusing, it's a classic tactic of psychological manipulation that many captors use on their victims to make them less likely to try and escape. Which of these kidnapping cases terrified you the most? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on The Bad Badger.